Have you ever thought about why men are only seen as providers and where this concept actually came from? I'm gonna break this down from a licensed therapist perspective, and I want to break down the concept of why men are only seen as providers. Should men be providers solely, and where this concept all comes from? Now, first and foremost, I want to thank Denise for bringing up this topic. I asked some questions in my community, and make sure you guys aren't, if you're not subscribed, make sure you guys are subscribed, because I do ask a lot of feedback in my community. So now let's get straight into it. So my thought was, how did we get to the point where men are seen as providers? Why aren't women seen as being providers, and why is it that men are the ones that have to provide, right? So all this content, you guys have been following me for a while. When it comes to things as far as like the beginning and where we get the foundation from, I'm a man of God, so I took to the Bible to get an answer to see, like, okay, in the earlier times, did God create man to be providers? Now, in my research, what I found out was that a couple things when we talk about the word provider, right? Provider doesn't necessarily mean that a man provides financially, first and foremost. So when God created man in his image, right? And when we talk about where the concept came from of man being providers, it's like, okay, well, the argument can be, hey, if God provides and man was made in God's image, shouldn't man provide? That could be an argument. When we talk about providing isn't just money. And I think this is where the concept of, I had to really look into the Bible and see, like, hey, what is a provider? What is a provider? And nowhere in the Bible, and I mean, you guys could challenge me on this. For sure. Nowhere in the Bible does it say a man should pay all the bills. Challenge me if y'all want. I haven't seen it. So if you guys seen it, most definitely, let me know. Maybe you teach me something. But through my research, I've never seen a verse that said a man should pay all the bills. Now, there are verses that do imply a man should provide, right? So when we look at, you guys ever studied Ephesians chapter 5, there's verses, I want to actually just go straight into the text, actually, Ephesians 5, 25 through 29. So this is where Paul, he describes how a husband should take responsibility and nurture his wife, as the husband should love his wife as God loves the church, right? So this is implying that the provision should be from an emotional standpoint, a spiritual standpoint, and a physical standpoint, right? Nowhere in there does it say like a man should pay all the bills. Now, when we do talk about a man being a provider, just from the biblical standpoint, there are points where men should be providers and leave a monetary inheritance. So if you read Proverbs, I'm gonna read Proverbs 13:22. It said a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. Let me be correct on that. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, not just his children, right? So we're talking about leaving generational wealth. We're talking about a man should do that, right? A man should provide that. Now, when we talk about provision, it's not strictly just, again, monetary. It can be physical, it can be spiritual, and it can be emotional support that a man can provide, right? So understanding when we talk about the concept of how a man should provide is not always monetary. And I think this is more so a thing we've created in our society, that a man should pay all the bills, a man should do all these things on a financial side, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And I think this is kind of where, if you talk about a man being seen as a sole provider, back in the day, I'm talking about like probably, within the last 50 years, a man was able to work one job, and a man was able to, provide for his family. The wage gap was always a big thing. Like if you look, even if you Google to this day, like what is the biggest issue between men and women? Usually men is like health, mental health, but with women is more so inequality, like the wage gaps. We have the parental, not parental, but we have the rights for women and abortion rights and things of that nature. So it's always the inequality part, right? So typically we're like, yeah, a man should provide because a man gets paid more, right? But that's not always the case. That's not always the case in this day and age. It is a lot harder for a man to provide solely based on his income, right? So this is where the word provider has to be broken down a bit more, because a provider doesn't necessarily just mean monetary. Now provider and leader are two different things as well too. So a man, in the Bible, it does imply that a man should lead. A man should be the head of the household. A man should, be a good example, to what the family is. And I think this is where it gets mixed up, because a lot of men, we're not that role model. We're not that responsible. We're not a stewardship. We're not following what God intended us to do. Sometimes we're cheating. We got porn addictions. We have, we may, believe in God, but we have all these sinful natures that doesn't allow us to really become the man or the men that we should be. Now, when it comes down to providers, that's a lot of, being a provider is not pressure from like a biblical standpoint, but it's pressure really from society. Society has built this image of like, okay, a man needs to do X, Y, and Z. And it's set up that way too, again, like, because typically even the wage gap is still a thing. Even in 2025, the wage gap is still a real thing where men get typically paid more than women, right? That's not with all jobs, but there's still some inequality in that. So now when we talk about men, again, being providers and being a leader, I do firmly believe that, even just from a standpoint of how men should be, like, we should be leaders. We should be leading a household. We should be able to provide, I feel like more than just finances, but you guys heard what I said earlier, like, physically, financially, emotionally, right? Emotionally, physically, and spiritually, right? So those three things we kind of lack a lot. We lack that emotional part, right? This is why I even just do what I do, right? This is why I specifically help men build healthier relationships, because our emotional capacity isn't where it needs to be, right? So how can we talk about being a provider and we can't provide things that we can't do for ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. We're not spiritually full, we're not physically full, even myself, like, that's always a constant thing. Like, a man should always be in shape and things of that nature. And, even myself, like, that's one thing I would say in full transparency. That's one thing that, I even struggle with is just like the physical part, right? It's trying to be in the best health that I can be, right? So I can live a long time. So sometimes that doesn't necessarily mean like we can't provide, but it's sometimes hard to emulate or do something for somebody that we can't necessarily do for ourselves. Now, when we talk about providing, provider pressure, that is again a social thing that we've created strictly on finances. It's not tied to the emotional things, because when we talk about a man being provider, right? Like if you ever, I'll challenge you guys, like next time you ask, like, hey, how should a man provide? I'm gonna guarantee that most people that say like a man should provide, it's gonna have to do with how much money they have in the bank, or how much money they make per year, or if they pay the bills. But with men, just kind of switching gears a bit, that puts a lot of pressure on us. Puts a lot of emotional pressure on us. It's a big emotional toll that we have this idea that we need to be providers, in a sense that we need to be able to pay certain bills, or we need to be able to do things. We talk about, okay, a man needs to make six figures. In 2025, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know, what state, if you live in a state like California, or if you live in like New York, or if you live like Florida, some parts of Florida, 6 figures really isn't enough to even support yourself sometimes. And I'm not even talking about living a lavish lifestyle. I'm just talking about like paying rent. I'm just talking about like, having transportation and things of that nature. Things are expensive. Things are expensive. So sometimes when we hit these pinnacles of like, oh, I made 6 figures, we thought we made it. And this is where I think a lot of pressure for men is like we get to a certain point that we thought was sustainable, but it took a while to even get there. So now we're frustrated that I was like, okay, now I make 6 figures, but now I'm learning like I can't, I still need to provide, or I still need to make more money. But men, we could provide on different levels. You might be even, this is pretty common as well too, like maybe the woman in the household, or maybe a girlfriend or fiance, wife, whoever it may be, they may make more money than you. So a lot of men don't like that, but there's different ways in which you can provide. Some men may not be able to work, and the woman has to work. And what is that? That takes an emotional toll, because you have this idea of like, hey, I need to be a provider, I need to do X, Y, and Z. But if you're not able to work, you just can't work. There might be physical inabilities, or you might have other disabilities that may limit you from doing certain things. And that's a real humbling experience to have, because if you're not able to work, and then you have this idea, especially if you were, let's say, for example, you were already working, and now you're no longer to work, you're no longer able to work, and now your lady has to make all the bread, and has to pick up for the the additional cost of the home, then that's not going to be a good feeling. That's not a good feeling at all. So I think we need to dismantle this idea that providing is strictly financial. Even from just coming from the source of like the society, what society's saying and what God intended this to be is not strictly financial. Part of it is, part of it can be, and it's, this is a conversation that a lot of folks, I think y'all need to have when you're in a relationship. What is the expectations from a woman for a man? Like what are, if you're dating somebody, right? Because a lot of times you may date somebody, and a good question to ask is like, hey, like, what is it that you're looking for in a man? Sometimes it's like, oh, I'm looking for, obviously, how much is money important to you? Is retirement and all these different things. So there's no surprises. And also too, if you are in a position where you may not want to necessarily, not necessarily date or anything like that, but if you feel like you need to, make more money, also know that you can provide in different ways, because money comes and money goes. If you guys made a lot of money, or if you guys lost a lot of money before, like myself, money comes and money goes. So the money part, is it good? Yeah, absolutely. Like it's good to have money and have, have money income coming in, but is that the only thing that's really important? So dismantling, I know with society it's harder to dismantle, but you can start within your home and dismantling what the idea of what a man's role is, right? Because again, there may be points where the woman makes more money, or you don't make as much money, and is a provider strictly financial. I've seen clips on social media where folks, I seen this clip the other day, and it was crazy. The lady literally divorced her husband because he lost his job, wasn't able to pay the bills. It was a couple months that went by. She said, hey, like, if I pay the bills, will you pay me back? He was like, no, because I'm not working. I'm still looking for a job. And they separated. And I was like, that's the wildest thing I've ever heard. That is the wildest thing I've ever heard. Like, and again, and the thing was, she was pretty clear, she said beforehand, like, I expect the man to pay all the bills. That's the expectation. Like, a woman should not be paying any bills. But the thing with that too, and it's a constant, right? Because bills don't ever stop. So if a man stops working, the bills don't care, right? So that constant pressure of having to continue to make money. And I think this is where the commitment comes in when we talk about marriage, as opposed to like being in a relationship. Because in a marriage, you made a commitment to God. You made a commitment through thick and thin, till death do us part. And thick and thin can be a lot of money, no money. It could be you have everything going and everything not going for a certain amount of time. But for men, we have to dismantle that idea of us being providers, again, from a financial standpoint. So make sure you guys communicate with your partner, whoever it may be. What are the expectations? And, you know, are these non-negotiables? Like, are you looking for a man? That's fine. Like, you know, everybody's not for you, fellas. Like, not everybody is for you. And that's okay. It's okay for you to, you know, not be with somebody that has that expectation that you feel like you can't meet. There's plenty of women out there that can help you, you know, not necessarily help you, but there's a lot of women that can be able to put you in a better position of being in a better position in your relationship. So that's one part that can be very helpful in just realizing that you don't have to, you know, just say yes to everybody or date everybody. That's a real thing. So my hopes is that this was helpful for y'all. I'm gonna break this down. I want to break this down a little bit more to a more extensive as I do more research on this, because I feel like this, again, this is a good topic, especially when we're talking about being a provider and provider pressure. So make sure you guys subscribe, like, do all the great things to keep this channel going. I appreciate y'all for tapping in. Y'all take care. Peace.